organisations involved for organising this discussion on Sharia law, legal pluralism and access to justice. Now, before I come on to the agenda this evening, I'd just like to raise a couple of other issues that I know will be of importance to people here, to all of you. In the early hours of last Friday, the two joint leaders of the People's Democratic Party, HDP, were arrested and detained along with at least 10 other parliamentary colleagues. I absolutely condemn the arrest of Kurdish officials and senior politicians. Turkey cannot claim to be a democracy if democratically elected representatives are arrested with impunity. Many of my constituents, Kurdish and of Alevi origin, they fear for the safety and well-being of their friends and family in Turkey. This is not acceptable. The situation is intolerable. President Erdogan and the Turkish authorities need to act immediately to restore justice and safeguard Turkey's democracy. I've already raised these urgent matters with government ministers in our parliament here today in the form of written questions and through what is known as an early day motion, some copies of which I will leave for those who wish to see it. And I think we must all continue to support those progressive voices in Turkey calling for greater democracy, the advancement of human rights and the promotion of equality and social justice. But it's not just in Turkey where Kurdish people are coming under attack. Kurdish civilians and forces on the front line against ISIL Daesh in Syria and Iraq. The Kurdish forces are playing an important role in liberating Raqqa and Mosul, the key strongholds of the Islamic State. And over the past few years, the Kurdish people have shown tremendous courage, resilience and resourcefulness in the face of this appalling terrorist group. And it's very important that the sacrifices made by the Kurds are recognised. They have a key role to play in helping to stabilise Syria and in the future of Iraq. I'll continue to support all efforts, both to build an enduring peace in the region and to recognise the Kurdish people's legitimate rights. Turning to tonight's event, the use of Sharia law in the UK has become a contentious issue. In the past year alone, we have seen the Home Office launch an independent review into the application of Sharia law in England and Wales. And over the summer, the Home Affairs Select Committee set up an inquiry to examine how Sharia councils operate in practice and what work they do in resolving family and divorce disputes and their relationship with the British legal system. There is much uncertainty about the role of Sharia courts within communities in this country. And I know that a number of concerns have been expressed about reports of women being victims of discriminatory decisions taken by Sharia councils, including when seeking divorce or custody over their children. I certainly don't agree with the Prime Minister on every issue, but she did make a good point when, as Home Secretary, she said, many British people of different faiths follow religious codes and practices and benefit a great deal from the guidance they offer. But there is only one rule of law in our country which provides rights and security for every citizen. We can give no support or succour to parallel legal systems which treat women unfairly. So tonight's discussion is very welcome and comes at an opportune time. These issues and concerns cannot be ignored and must be discussed in open and honest and frank debate such as this. So I'm sure everyone will get a great deal out of this evening's discussion, and I'm grateful to all of our speakers and organisations for making this happen. And we need to have more of these kinds of discussion and create a more open situation in which women who feel they have been a victim of Sharia law can actually speak up as well. I'm sorry that I can't stay with you further. I'm just pleased to have managed to get here, but I do have a meeting in my constituency where it's a local party meeting, and I know they're going to be making some decisions, and I feel a tremendous urge to be part of those decisions, as they will have a significant impact on me and my work. So please accept my apologies, but also my commitment to the matters under discussion. Thank you very much. There's nobody better to chair your evening's events than Ray. Thank you.
Welcome all to this public forum, Sharia law, legal pluralism and access to justice. Before we start, I would like to thank John Ryan MP who is hosting these fabulous events for us tonight. And Kurdish Progress is organizing these events with couple projects, One Law for All, Center for Secular Space, South World Black Sisters, Iranian and Kurdish Women's Rights Organization, and British Muslims for Secular Democracy. I am director of the Kurdish Progress, and the London-based Center for Kurdish Progress is an independent, non-partisan, non-profit organization with a focus on Kurdistan and Kurdish people in both in UK and abroad. With the initial aim to achieve greater understanding and awareness of the region, Kurdish Progress provides an open forum for political debates and economic and social development, as well as building a strong platform to improve the position of the Kurdish people. And tonight we have 7 important speakers this evening. And in total we have 2 hours, and each speaker will speak for 10 minutes approximately. Yeah. After that we will have a question and answer session for the remainder of the evening. And I just want to give opportunity to first speaker is Maryam Namazi. She's a spokesperson for One Law for All and the Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain. She hosts a weekly television program called Bread and Roses, broadcast in Iran via Live Channel TV. She has recently been awarded the International Secularism Prize from the Comité Laïcité Republic in Paris. Yeah, you can start. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I didn't realize I was going to be first. So I've got to keep you away. I wanted to thank you very much for coming, and thank you all, especially Hosam, for organizing today's event. And for me, coming from Iran, I am quite frustrated to see that there are Sharia courts in this country. It's one of the reasons why many people like myself have fled to a place like Turkey. And then to find out that we have to fight the same fights that we fought in Iran and in the Middle East and North Africa right here as well. Now, these courts, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that some of the greatest abuses of minority women's rights take place in them, in the same way that family courts, Sharia family courts in Iran and Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere also are perpetrating the greatest violations of women's rights in the family. There's lots of examples, you must know of them. It includes the fact that women's testimony is worth half that of a man's, the fact that women have limited right to divorce, whereas men have unilateral right to divorce, the fact that child custody is given back to the father at a preset age, irrespective of the welfare of the child, inheritance, girls get half of what men do, and so on and so forth. Now, very often we hear that these are mundane and trivial issues. Well, it's not mundane and trivial if you're a woman and you want to get your rights in the family. Now, of course, we know that there's no official Sharia law. We know that the practice varies in different countries. But when you look at the Islamist movement, you do see that they promote the Sharia, just one form of Sharia, and if you don't abide by it, you're not a proper Muslim, you're an apostate, and so on and so forth. From our perspective, challenging the Sharia courts is challenging the Islamist project. It's very clear that to us that is what needs to be done, that's what's being done. Now we're asked, where's your empirical evidence that these are linked to the Islamist movement? My question is, where is your empirical evidence that it is not linked to the Islamist movement? you look at our experiences over 40 years, those of us who have been fighting against Sharia in Iran, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Algeria, in many other countries, our evidence is very clear that when the Islamists come, they target women first. And when they come, they attack women's rights in the family because it's easy to attack women. Women are always expendable, and also for the British state. And this is something that, especially because women are seen to be the source of honor in Britain, because of cultural relativism, we see that minority women are seen to be extensions of their community, not citizens with equal rights. Now, there's a lot of people out there, and I'm surprised how many there are out there, who are insisting that Sharia courts have nothing to do with the Islamist movement. They refuse to acknowledge it, whether it's the British government, very often people in the British government, whether it is so-called Islamic feminists, and so on and so forth. But I think this is based on wishful thinking, not reality. Sharia bodies have clearly grown out of an Islamist agenda. Across the UK, if you look at Sharia bodies, there are links with Ahl Hadith, Jamaat Islami, Tablighi, Jamaat, the Muslim Brotherhood, Salafis, Deobandis, Barelwis, with the common message of separation and intolerance. The Deobandi movement, for example, has a strong influence in the Birmingham Sharia Council, and they control more than half the mosques in this country, together with the Tablighi. And as Elham Mania has written in a recent book on Sharia law and women's rights, she says that, for example, the Islamic Sharia Council in Leighton, now this is a Sharia council that the British government often promotes as a good Sharia council. And it's awful, you know, if that's good, you can imagine what's going on elsewhere. If you look at that Sharia council in particular, there are affiliations with Jamaat Islami under the guise of UK Islamic Mission, the Muslim Brotherhood under the front of Muslim Welfare House, and Global Wahhabi Islam under the front of Muslim World League. If you look at the judges who are working on these courts, some of them belong to Salafi Islam, for example, Haytham Haddad, who until recently was a judge there, Ahl Hadith, who are the Salafis of South Asia. So one of the founders of the Sharia Leighton Council, Suhaib Hassan, for example, he has said in his blog that our house was always the beacon for the Jamaat, which is an Islamist group. He said his father actually even was given the task of providing spiritual training to the Jamaat, and that his father was responsible for compiling a collection of hadith about the character building of a true Muslim. And we know what that means. This collection, known as Intikhab Hadith, has become a major source of inspiration for the members of the Jamaat. Now, this is the same Suhaib Hassan who said, even if cutting off of hands and feet or flogging the drunkard and the fornicator seems to be abhorrent, once they're implemented, they become a deterrent for the whole society. And that's why in Saudi Arabia, the crime rate is very, very low. Of course, that's because the Saudi government is the criminal in many instances, but because it's legal, it's considered that the crime rate is very low. Now, Khola Hassan, who is celebrated as a woman judge, one of the few women judges of these councils, she said that her father made this statement 10 years ago. Well, he hasn't taken it back, so it doesn't matter whether he made it 10 years ago or 50 years ago. And that it was in the context of an academic discussion on classical Islam. He categorically denies that he promotes the introduction of Sharia law in Britain. Now, of course, this is again a play on semantics. All of these Islamists want Sharia law. They are implementing Sharia law's family code, but they say that the criminal code can't be imposed until it is an Islamic state. Now, this is the same Suhaib Hassan who was filmed in a Panorama documentary saying to a woman who had come to him facing violence and asking for a divorce, I think you should be courageous enough to ask this question to him. Just tell me, why are you so upset, huh? Is it because of my cooking? Is it because I see my friends, huh? So I can correct myself. Now, he is a member of the European Council of Fatwa and Research, which is chaired by Youssef Qaradawi, who is the spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, who has said, by the way, that domestic violence is permissible when you're dealing with a disobedient wife. There's another chairperson of this very Sharia council, Maulana Abu Saeed. He says calling it marital rape is the act of aggression, because you cannot have rape in a marriage, because women must have sex with their husbands when they require it. And if you call it marital rape, it's because of your misguided Western values. Nakhola Hassan, again, the celebrated woman Sharia judge, as if it's enough to be a woman and that means you're a defender of women's rights. That's not true. We know very clearly that's not true. There are women who defend death by stoning in the Iranian parliament. You can't celebrate them just because they're women. You have to see what their politics are, what side they're standing with. Now, she said this comment on marital rape, that Maulana Abu Saeed is a highly respected scholar. Who cares? He was quoting the traditional Islamic discussion regarding rape within marriage. Nonsense. This is, again, a play with semantics in order to dupe the public to thinking that they are having theoretical discussions while they are abusing and violating women's rights day in and day out. And what's interesting, this is something Ita Sakya mentioned, if you look at the recent Home Affairs Select Committee hearing, everyone there, practically except for myself and El-Hamania, were pro-Sharia courts in some way. And they're all women. They're sort of rebranding a court system that is male-centered, that is patriarchal, that is fundamentalist, to be represented by women so that it looks as if it's cuddlier and cozier and it has something good in there for women. Now, the British government has for too long ignored these links in order, I think, partially to outsource legal justice to these kangaroo courts because of the cuts. It's a very useful way to manage minority communities in this country. And it also thinks that it's a good way of appeasing the Islamists. But the Islamists go after women first, so it's not really an appeasement. Now, the government's argument is that these are not really courts. Women choose to go to them. They have a right to do so. But I think it's not that simple. They're clearly parallel legal systems because they call themselves courts, those presiding call themselves judges, and the women who go to them, very often vulnerable, do think that these rules are binding, and they are told that if they don't abide by these rules, they are considered apostates and worse. Now, the Iranian Kurdish Women's Rights Organization has said that the very process of these courts is tantamount to abuse. So it's not just that they are bringing abusive laws, discriminatory laws, the process itself is tantamount to abuse. I think I would just like to end by saying that we're told that if these courts don't exist, there will be more abuse against women. This is nonsense. The courts are the reason why there is so much abuse against women. And now they are portraying themselves as saviors of women. If we get rid of them, we end up protecting women more. I think we need to decide fundamentally as a society, do we want to have separate courts for separate people just because they're considered different? Jewish courts, Sharia courts, Hindu courts, Buddhist courts, lawyer jirgas for Afghans, and so on and so forth. Or do we want to treat people as citizens and make sure that they have equal rights before and under the law? I think it's not racism to demand equality for minority women. It is racist to say that minority women should have different rights and different standards applied to them. I think we need to push for equality. And this is something that is not just a Western value. It's very much something that people are fighting for across the board. Women in India demanding talaq, the end of the triple talaq rule, the women of Rojava who have banned Sharia courts, the women of Algeria fighting for an end to Sharia's family codes there, women in Iran, and on and on and on. We stand with them in this global fight against Islamism and for women's rights and equality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maryam Namazi, for giving us this useful information. Our next speaker is Dr. Sabine Bapir Tadi. And she is a lecturer in psychology at the University of West London. And Sabine is currently working as a counseling psychologist within a women's rights charity with victims of domestic violence, honor-based violence, forced marriage, and female genital mutilation. And her topic, she will speak on psychological impact of Sharia counsels on women. And we can start.
I would like to begin by bringing to your attention a famous psychological experiment conducted by Milgram in the early 60s at Yale University. I believe that the results of this experiment may shed some light as to why people accept the rulings of Sharia courts. First, let me ask you, suppose an authority figure asks college students to administer a near-lethal electric shock to another student who has not harmed them in any way. What percentage of students will agree to do it? The majority of people who have been asked this question, they have stated that a very small number will actually do it, so maybe around 1%. In reality, Milgram's experiment of obedience to authority showed that 64% of people will give a near-lethal electric shock if the person that asked them to do it was somebody in authority. Obedience to authority plays a detrimental role when considering religious arbitrations because arbitrators are perceived by women and the community to hold tremendous power. Most importantly, they are perceived as authority figures. Showing disobedience to a religious authority figure will imply not fulfilling your religious obligations and risk being stigmatized. But when it comes to vulnerable women and obeying religious arbitrations, it becomes a case of you are damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Let me explain further what I mean by this. I have worked as a counseling psychologist at ICRO for the last 6 years. The clients that I have worked with are all women who have experienced one or more of the following issues, and that is domestic violence, honor-based violence, forced marriage, and female genital mutilation. This means that they have suffered psychological, sexual, physical, and financial forms of abuse. As a result of the above forms of violences that the women have experienced, they would often present with symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, severe depression and anxiety, severe lack of self-esteem or confidence, and a general lack of trust. Lack of trust is expected as the ones closest to them, that is their family, or spouses or even community, have abused their trust. In a nutshell, the majority of the clients that I have worked with therapeutically and I'm still working with are vulnerable women. Some of the women who have had counseling at ICRO have attempted to seek divorce through a Sharia court or council. This is because of pressure from the family or a lack of awareness of their rights, or even with the false hope that it will help them move on. To this day, I have yet to work with a client who their expectation has actually been met. On the contrary, there is an increase of cases where vulnerable women who have pursued divorce from a Sharia court have been left feeling exposed, and it has increased their vulnerability. This is often the case that women are actually re-traumatized by recalling the reasons as to why they are seeking divorce and are made to feel that it is their fault. This is not a complicated process. Religious arbitrators know that they hold a certain form of authority in the eyes of the woman. Some of the women have reported that when they saw divorce in a Sharia court, and even when they disclosed that they had experienced domestic violence, they were encouraged to forgive their husbands so that they can uphold their honor within the community. When children are involved, women have been threatened that the children must remain with their father. In terms of finance, if the woman is the one that is seeking divorce, she is told that she's not entitled to any financial support. The most heartbreaking situation which even as a therapist I find very difficult to make sense of, is women who have been raped by their husbands, and they have disclosed this in a Sharia court, have been told that it was their fault for not fulfilling their duties as a wife. That is to sexually satisfy their husbands. Now consider how brave a woman has to be to bring this issue up in front of men, as Sharia councils consist mainly of men, and then to be told that basically it is your fault. Please remember, somebody in authority is telling her that basically you did not do what you're supposed to do, so she is the one to be blamed for being abused. Based on the woman that I have worked with, it is apparent that Sharia courts prevent women from reporting any form of abuse and often encourage them to return to their husband or their perpetrators. This makes a woman feel more helpless and more hopeless about seeking help or considering to leave. By going through the process of a Sharia court, women are at risk of being re-traumatized, feeling that it is their fault, and most importantly, they're at risk of further abuse. Let's not forget the most vulnerable of all, which is the children. Children are also victims of domestic violence, because witnessing domestic violence alone can lead to developing depression, anxiety, including PTSD. Women who think that they may lose their children by leaving will return, which means that the children are also remaining as victims. Legally, social services must be contacted when there is evidence of domestic violence. Yet, in a Sharia court, the children are used as bargaining chips to secure the woman's return. In conclusion, these victims become hidden from society and their rights are concealed by religious arbitrators. People who are vulnerable will obey what religious arbitrators recommend or suggest because they are in authority. What these women need is a safe environment where they can begin the process of psychological healing. They need a platform where their rights can be explained to them so that they can regain autonomy over their life and make their own decisions. Remember, people who have experienced honor-based violence and break away from their community lose everything, not just family and their wider life, but also a part of their identity. Religious arbitrators know this and will often use this to induce feelings of guilt and make the woman feel like she is the perpetrator. The way to overcome this guilt is by returning, and unfortunately, many women do obey this order. I would like to end with a quote from one of my clients. I was told by an imam and my family that it is haram to leave my husband and haram for the children to grow up with no father. So I must stay. They all knew he hates me. I felt like staying makes everyone happy. I mean, it meant I am doing well and I am strong. But leaving was like I'm doing something bad. I'm not a woman that is strong enough or good enough. In conclusion, religious arbitration is a form of violence against women and girls. So let's end religious arbitrations and have one law for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabine Bambi-Tardi. Yeah, it's really worrying to hear, the women and children always there suffering from these uneducated men, I can say, yeah. And our next speaker is going to be Hozan Mahmoud. And Hozan Mahmoud is a women's rights campaigner, a public lecturer, and co-founder of Culture Project, a UK-based transnational project formed